Okay, folks, top of the hour. Once again, welcome. This fantastic, what is it, Thursday today, believe it or not. Sure, another day and another Wisdom's Tribe get together. So welcome, everybody. Maybe some more folks will join us as we get going, but I think let's get straight into it. Lee, let's talk about risk this morning.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all. I was thinking a lot around, what is risk and what would we count as risk? And I had to think about my own life and think about what risks have I taken and were they in actual fact risks? So I was just doing a comparison. For example, when I was 18, I was an exchange student, got into a plane for the first time, flew from a bright sunny Zimbabwe to Chicago in a blizzard, stayed with families that I'd never met and spent a year there. And I compare that to my daughter, who at the age of 18 flew, she had been in a plane before, but she flew to Europe on a holiday visa, having a 1 month training under her belt, and walked up and down the promenade along the French Riviera looking for a job on the super yachts. So two different, both excursions overseas, but two different types of risk. An exchange student, or going into a ready-made environment versus leaping into, although there was a known factor in terms of this is what you do, there was no guarantees that she would get a job. She was also on her own entirely. And so there was a different level of risk. And so is it courage? Is there a difference between what we risk going into the unknown and simply stepping up into a new situation that it requires courage? So I've been thinking about, is there a difference between what we do that's different? So for example, during lockdown, I've been contacting old customers that I haven't been in touch with for years, sometimes 10 years. I got in touch with one customer that it's been at least 12 years since I've been in touch with him. He's now the managing executive of some large corporation. And I sent him a mail and I said, hey there, remember me? I have got these wonderful new things to offer. And so is that a risk? Because he can, 1, ignore me, 2, reject me, 3, tell me, stop bothering me. But is it really, what pain does that really cause? What damage does that really have? I've learned over the years, when you're in sales, it doesn't matter if people say no. So is it really a risk? On the other hand, I've been talking to authors, first-time authors, and the level of risk of putting their ideas out, of sharing their stories, of being vulnerable, not knowing how people will take it, feeling like they're putting something very personal in front of other people that they've got no way of filtering because they're not present when people are reading it. And so there's that risk as well of maybe putting ourselves into a very vulnerable situation where we may not know what others feel or think about us, and then that may be a risk. And then the other risk that I wanted just to think about is the risk into the utter unknown. And I posted that link to an article, I'm not sure if any of you had a chance to read it, of a coach for leaders or a leadership specialist saying now we're in a situation where he describes that the beeswax, which is normally solid, in other words, we've got these set procedures and processes and ways of doing things, and that with this massive social and economic experiment that has been instituted around the world, that the beeswax has been softened. And that gives us an opportunity now to do things that we would never normally have a chance to do. And he talks about take the leap, whatever that leap is. It might be saying to your staff, we are never going to go back to an office again. We've figured out now how to do remote working. You've been asking for flexible working hours for years. We've practiced it. We've done it. So we're not having the expense of a huge corporate office anymore. It may be we are only focusing on these products, or we are now going to completely change our product set because we've had to pivot so in 180 degrees. We're not going to plan A, we're doing plan B. That's our new business strategy. So I put all of these to you. I think even of President Ramaphosa's speech last night, and think about the risks that leaders are having to take, or decisions leaders are having to make, weighing up the risks of lives and livelihoods. So hopefully I am putting enough on the table that you can pick up some thinking about what are risks that you've taken in your own life. Were they real risks? How would you identify what exactly is a risk? And how important is it to risk for our own success and growth? Over to you.
Great, thanks, Lisa. I think I'm going to shoot straight across to Ian, because I know Ian always says the answer is yes. So maybe you'd like to explain that to everybody, Ian.
Yeah, thanks. You know, it's interesting, risk. I've got two examples. I think that risk is, you know, we risk with everything we do every single day, whether we're crossing the street or starting a business. And I think there's four elements to managing risk. One is skills, knowledge, understanding, and confidence. So I use an example of Trevor with the doozy and the rapids that he shot. And I have no doubt that Trevor and his partner realized there was a risk factor in doing that. But what mitigated the risk to a certain extent was, first of all, they were skilled at what they were doing. They had knowledge and understanding of the river environment, and they had confidence, because if they had no confidence and they were unsure of themselves, I think the result would have been inevitable. And you know, when you go through something like that, and they say there's people that have fallen out of canoes, and there are still people that have to fall out of canoes. So when you do that, there's certain things you can do to protect yourself as best as possible. And I think that's for me, is when you have a situation where you know there's a certain amount of risk, I think those four things help you in terms of managing that risk as best as humanly possible. The other example is, many years ago, I was flying back from northern Zululand to Durban. I was flying along the coast, and I passed Richards Bay, and you know, I looked and I thought, do I land for fuel? I thought, I'm all right. So I did a calculation in terms of my ground speed, because your airspeed indicator in an airplane is not the actual true speed that you're flying. So I did a calculation, I worked out what my ground speed was, and I thought, well, that's fine. I've got probably half an hour to 40 minutes reserve, which is plenty for the trip from Richards Bay to Durban. However, 10 minutes later, I hit some serious headwinds. The southwesterly came through, and now I had some really big headwinds. So when I did a calculation now, my ground speed was a lot slower. So I had a couple of options now, because now I was at the point of no return. So I had to now say to myself, well, the first thing I'll do is I've got to climb. I've got to have altitude. I was flying at 500 feet. I needed to go up to at least 1,500 feet. So if anything happened to the aircraft, if the engine stopped, at least I had the altitude to be able to glide to find somewhere to land. And the last 10 minutes of the flight was, I was switching from my left-hand fuel tank to my right-hand fuel tank. And it was kind of a nervous situation because at the time, I didn't think the risk was that great, but then I hit circumstances that now changed the dynamics completely. So I had to use my skills, my knowledge, and my understanding and the confidence to say, right, this is what I've got to do in order to mitigate this risk. So those are two examples where I think that if we can use those four, those four things as best we can, we find ourselves probably being able to manage the risk as far as is humanly possible. I mean, we get thrown curved balls and we got to deal with those, but those four things help us perhaps get through that. If that's probably an example of how I see risk.
Great, thanks, Ian. And I think in both those examples, you probably need to add a fifth element, but preferably in front of the other four, and that's you've got to be a little bit mad. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go across to the Mad Kappa. Trevor, your thoughts?
Oh, well, you're addressing me. What Mad Kappa? I think Ian just made me think a little bit about that exercise. And there are a couple of things I'd like to add to it. I think Ian absolutely nailed it for me. What I'd like to add to it, though, is in order for us to get there, we had wrapped a couple of boats, for a couple of years. We had tackled various rapids, and we'd learned what not to do because it was quite painful. But unless we'd actually gone in and done it and taken the risk and kept pushing the boundaries, pushing the envelopes, we would not have been able to do that. And from there, we just got bigger and bigger. So the more you actually tackle things that you believe are risky, the easier it becomes, and other people stand on the side and they say, geez, how are these guys? I mean, they're fearless and all that sort of nonsense. Meanwhile, all we've been doing is practicing. We'd failed. In fact, it's failing forward, Ian. That's really what it's about. We'd failed forward and learned and got experience and went ahead. Another thing that I must also say, the reason I actually did these things was for the thrill of it. And I think that living life and taking risks in life is about thrill. And we know what the flip side of that is. And I'm asking questions. What have people learned out of lockdown? Well, I've learned a lot of people have just actually sat on their couches. And if you sit on your couch for your entire life, you risk having a heart attack. So whether you do something or you don't do something, life is a high-risk venture.
Great, thanks, Trevor. I'm going to go across to Umpo because I think she's another risk taker amongst us. So Umpo, what are your thoughts?
Morning, everyone. Yeah, I think going out this morning was also another risk that I took. It's freezing. But anyway, yeah, I'm a big believer in risk. I feel like risk is just generally a gateway to achievement. I can't live without risk. Like if something doesn't feel scary and dangerous, then I'm not interested. So, I also use my appetite for risk to protect myself. So, I've walked away from deals and clients and things because the situation doesn't suit me. And people look at me and go, "Are you mad? How can you walk away from something like that? You know what that's gonna do to your reputation." But I always end the story well to say I'm leaving this because it doesn't serve me. And this might not look good on my resume, or it might not, but this is not working for me and my team. And yeah, so far it's just worked in my favor. So yeah, I'm a big believer in risk. Absolutely.
Great, thanks, Umpo. Let's go across to Cecile.
Okay, Lee. My children also did directly after school. My daughter was 17, and it was 9/11. And we decided she's going to do a work experience in America. as a ski instructor, and she's only skied once in her life when she was 13, but because of her sporting ability, they said that she could be a ski instructor. So off she set. First of all, she couldn't get off, and that was a big risk because financially, she literally had the plane ticket that she went to America to, and then she had to scratch her own little pad there. She went off. First of all, she couldn't go because 9/11. Then they only allowed, instead of 50 people at a time, they only allowed 2 people at a time. So instead of going at the end of November, she ended up going about the 20th of December only. And when she arrived in America with a fat snow and everything, her suitcase didn't arrive with her. So there she was skiing, the ski instructor at the ski resort that she knew no one. And she had to borrow clothing from everyone for the next 2 weeks. It took 2 weeks for her suitcase to arrive there. So I taught my daughter a little bit of risk there. And then when Ruben was in matric, we decided he's going to go and find a job in England. And he did exactly what your daughter did. He walked the streets and found a job. And then until he found a cricket club, and he played cricket he carried on with his stay for another year, and he played cricket for two years for Norwich, for a county cricket team. So I think I taught them to be risk takers early in their lives. And when Trevor was talking about the canoeing, I was thinking about skiing, because when you ski, you can stay on the blue slopes all the time and it's nice and fun, but sometimes you have to challenge yourself and then go, because I've been skiing a lot, I take the black slope, which looks all fine and good right to start, and then all of a sudden, oh my word, do you hit something that you think, oh, no, I can't do this. But then I always say to myself, lots of other people have done this, come on, you can do this, just do it, just put one foot in front of the other, just get on with it. And I've survived all of that. But when it comes to financial risks, I am a bit wary, but I've done some financial risks in the past. But I can't really pinpoint them, but I know it's been scary doing them. But right now, with the selling of the PPE, this is pretty risky as well, because I'm now talking to some buyers that want to buy 1 million masks. So we're talking about 50-60 million rand that they have to fork out. And I'm like, this is like big money. I've never worked with such big money. But then I say, no, this happens every day. So come on, let's just do this. So I'm learning to be a little bit risky with this. And with AfriSam, I've had to take the risk, leap of faith, or whatever it is. I've got a contract with them, but they are pushing me financially that I have to, they will only pay after 7 days. So it means I've got to carry the financial, not really a risk, but the cash flow for 7 days in my own bank account. And small businesses don't have that big bank accounts to carry the risks, but I've done that. And we've come through the first 3 weeks of doing that. And now we're on second rounds, and now they're pushing me a little bit more for more products. But yeah, I've now learned, and my skin is a little bit thicker, so I've learned to negotiate a little bit better with him, but the risk is still there. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Cecile. Also a fantastic story about just how you've changed things around in this in these lockdown times. So well done with that. So great story there. Let's go across to Herman.
Morning all. I think life without risk is boring. However, I lived in a period where I was avoiding risk at all costs. Those of you who were around remember my little story about being emotionally totally numb, building a huge wall around myself. And that ended up for me to such an extent numbing my feelings and my emotions that I became a fully fledged alcoholic. And for me, at the time, if you like, was risk avoiding. little did I know that the risk I was taking was much, much bigger than the risks I avoided. And eventually, the risk to take to stop drinking, believe you me, is a very, very scary journey. Because you actually don't know what real life is all about. You don't know who you are. And to all of a sudden face life on life's terms becomes a very, very risky and scary kind of experience. But I'm pleased to say I haven't drank for well over 30 years, so it's not a problem. I've taken a lot of risks ever since, and as I said, life without risk is boring. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Simon, and really appreciate you sharing that. That obviously was difficult, so thank you for that. Let's go across to Sally.
Morning, everybody. So, wow, what an interesting topic, Lee. Thank you. I've made a few notes while we're speaking, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of a personal spin on what it means to me. So, I think, as I agree with what Mpho says in terms of risk and what it means to you, sort of how it talks to your values and how it relates to you being your authentic self. If I think about situations that I've been in, especially in HR, in the corporate environment over the years, you do get placed into positions where you actually just have to walk away because it goes against what you believe, and I can completely relate to that. And then there's a few extra thoughts that I have is that I've taken two really big risks in my life that you know, I've taken a lot of smaller things, but the two I think that have made me where I am today in front of you guys is that the first one is my decision to get out of my abusive marriage. That for me, it was a big risk because I've got two small children, and you've got to calculate it in terms of what it means for your future, and you have to take just all these other various factors into consideration. And if I hadn't taken that risk, I shudder what to think. I don't want to think about where I actually would have been today if I hadn't made that decision. So that is for me a form of calculated risk. And then also the decision when I left corporate last year, the decision to look, I was down and out. So the decision for me to do something and start my own business, that was sort of a risk that I took, but there was. It's like this, I have to put everything into it, otherwise I'm not going to make it work. So it's almost like you've got different depths of levels of risks that you take, sort of, if you weigh it up. And then also, just the last thought from my side, I think motivation also plays a big role in the risk that you're going to take. If I relate back to the story of my divorce, my motivation, my hunger to actually just, to be a whole person again, that I think motivated me enough to get out on the other side. And then just the last thought, there's somebody, I saw a post somewhere that said that if your dream doesn't scare you, then it's not big enough. I actually can't think of who said it or who wrote it, but it's just amazing. So, and yeah, it's like Mpho says, everything has worked out in my favor, and I'm actually feeling very blessed. So, thanks, guys.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, Sally. And yeah, I think there's a couple of stories here. You talk about the courage to actually do what you need to do, and courage is not the absence of fear; it's actually facing the fear. And I think you guys have done that. So fantastic, well done. Mpulela, let's go across to you.
Hi, good morning to everyone. Interestingly, I had to think a little bit about this topic yesterday because I don't think I'd given it a lot of thought before. Generally, I'm a person who gives a lot of thought to a lot of things, but I hadn't thought a lot about risk. So one of the things that I did was just to look at what the definition or the dictionary definition of what risk is. And interestingly, what I found there is that it was saying is to expose someone or something valued to danger, harm, or loss. And what struck me was the fact that it's not that you're just exposing something, but it is something of value. So what you have to lose is quite valuable to you, you know? So that was a very interesting for me. And then it gave me the thought that I guess then risk is two extreme ends. A potential to lose something of value, but also a potential to gain even more or add even more to the value that you already have. And so the thoughts that I was starting to have was, how do you cultivate the mind that says, yes, there is a potential to lose the value that I already have, but there's also potential to gain even more. And I thought, I guess that's a difference between those who do take risks and those who don't. Those who do focus a lot on what potentially may come out of taking the risks, and those who do not take the risk focus so much on what they're going to lose. And so I also then went through my own life trying to see where have I acted in one of the ways or another. In actual fact, I wrote it as, I guess, therefore, risk is a battle between two extreme ends. And I use the word battle because I then thought, I guess it's not something that you do once and all of a sudden you are great at taking risks. Probably it's challenging continuously and all the time because the risks keep increasing and becoming higher and higher. But another thing for me was that what's also then interesting, I guess, the higher the risk, the higher the potential for returns. So I was asking myself, where do I feel I fit in that extreme? So I know, Lee, you're the one who usually asks the questions, but I guess for me, it's interesting to say, how do you cultivate the mind that looks and focuses on the potential to gain rather than the potential to lose? Examples of my own life, I think I took a big risk when I left work after 8 months of marriage. Because now I had a new person in my life who had so much dreams and expectations. And here I am saying, no more working. We're doing this thing on our own. I think that was a big risk. But at the same time, I look at when is it that I don't take a risk when I'm supposed to. One of the things that I picked up is that I'm quite a thinker. I'm good at thinking about things. And so that puts me in a space of strategy and so forth. But when it comes to implementation, then sometimes I don't do as much as I believe I can. And so it was interesting for me because then it says you take risks, but you then go into the comfort of knowing that you're a good planner and a good strategist. And that now becomes your comfort. Can you take the risk of saying, now I will go out there and implement what I've strategized? But the last one that probably from the group, when we have the time you can help with, is I've also picked up that probably life experiences do influence how much one takes risks. For instance, I grew up in an environment where the experience of the difficulty of being in poverty was very real. And that becomes a strong image in your mind that if I take a risk, there's a potential of going back there. And I've gone through it. I know what it means. It's not something that I'm imagining. I've gone through the pain of it. I've gone through the humiliation of it. I've gone through, so somebody who comes from that space may sometimes find that it is a bit difficult to take a certain type of risk. Forgive me, I did take a bit longer today.
No, fantastic, Mpilelo. Thank you. And I think some great questions you've posed, and there are definite topics for some future sessions. So thanks very much for that. I'd like to come across to Donovan. Donovan, first time with us this morning. I would like to welcome you and ask you how you got to find us this morning, and B, what you think you've got yourself into. So Donovan, welcome. Donovan, are you with us? You need to unmute your mic to chat if you can. Okay, looks like there we go. Okay, Donovan, you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah, we got you loud and clear now.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hi, everyone. Trust everyone is well and keeping safe. I was introduced to this group by Jasper, and I was able to log in the first time he asked me to, and then I think I'm going to make it a point to log in as often as I can. I really learn a lot, especially when the different members, share personal experiences. That helps a lot. And then in terms of the topic of risk, when you're on your own, it's easier to take big risk, but when you have a family, it's not so easy. But I think it needs to be a calculated decision, weighing up the pros and cons, etc. Like in the past, I took some risk. I did a lot of project work at risk, and to date, no reward. So it makes it a bit difficult for me to take risk, in future. But as I said, I'll always just calculate and see if it's worth taking the risk. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Donovan, and welcome. So let's pop across to Stella.
Good morning, everybody. Very interesting talk this morning. I think the biggest risk that I took was last year when I decided to leave corporate after 22 years. Previously in my life, I considered myself to be a bit of a risk averser. But I think it also stems from what's the reason why you're taking the risk. Yeah, I don't want to go into that, but I just want to, when Cecile shared the story about her daughter, I want to quickly share with you my daughter as well. And I think I didn't realize maybe I've also taught her a bit to be a bit risky. For her 21st birthday, we wanted to give her a big party, and she says, "No, Mom, I don't want a big party. I want to go on a Contiki tour to London." She was 21 years. She's never traveled abroad, and there was no one going with her. She went alone on her own and do this Contiki tour, and she loved it, meeting new people and touring in London. And then she came back, and then when she was 24, she decided she wants to go and work in South Korea. And I remember we took her to the airport. She had these interviews with job opportunities out overseas, and she had to choose between China and South Korea. She got 2 opportunities that she was successful in the application. And today I say, thank God that she went to South Korea, not China. But we put her on the plane. We were at the airport. She didn't have a visa. Her visa wasn't completed. We didn't know, is this a real opportunity? Is she going? Is she not being tracked by a scam overseas? And but she took the leap of faith, and she was 24 years. I couldn't tell her, no, you can't, and I just prayed, and things worked out for her. So she was supposed to go for a year, and now she's been there 4 years already. So yeah, that's one of my success stories of my children. So yeah, I think sometimes you just gotta, I think it's also, you must trust your gut. Like last year with when I had to leave corporate, I knew this is what I had to do. And when I left corporate, I didn't know that I was at that stage going to go the mediation route. It only came a few months later. And this is a huge risk for me because I've never done this before. But yes, I believe my heart is right, and that it's going to work out. So in 6 months' time, we'll talk about this risk story again. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thanks, Stella. Jasper, let's come across to you for some final comments before we wrap up for this morning.
interesting stories there, and I think every story triggers. It's like starting to tell jokes. You don't have a joke until people start telling their jokes, then it triggers your jokes. But I was first of all triggered by Ian's point on the point of no return. So the stress is not on, and you still have options until you get to that point of no return, and then things happen very fast. And I was just thinking of an example way back in 1994. So I was already 2 years retrenched. I was eating very fast into my capital. I took an extra bond on my house at that stage, and I started to reach the end of that. We were full-time in New Life. The business started to grow steadily, but we were still not at the point of break even. And then one of the people in the team after 94 in the election, the world opened up. And I met someone from Uganda, and they started to say, but we need to bring the business to Uganda, and wasn't in the company's planning to go to any other country yet. So about 6 months down the line with this kind of pressure, they started to send products over when they go to visit their family. People started to get an appetite for the products. And the company basically asked me to say, go to these people and tell them that we can't come in yet, but they're welcome to use the product. So that was more or less my mission. And I got into Uganda scared at that stage, not knowing, because last we heard was the Idi Amin kind of scenarios. And the first night, and I made it very clear to the host who took me in, that I'm here basically just to tell people, thank you for using the products, but we're not yet ready for you. And they said nothing, but that evening they took me to a restaurant, rented the restaurant, and when I walked in, they said, all right, you can't tell that. We've got some celebrities here. They came to hear how we bring the business to Uganda. And I was not prepared for any kind of thing like that, but so it's like that point of no return. So you either stick to the old guns, or I just said to them, all right, I'm actually here to tell you that we can't bring the business to Uganda, but the way we can bring it to Uganda is, and then I painted as difficult and as problematic as possible. And it came to the point to say, if I can find investors, now you must understand, an average salary for a manager in Uganda at that stage was 300 Rand a month, not dollars, Rand. And the dollar was already at about 10 to the Rand. So I said, if I can find investors and I need $1,000 per investor, then we can start setting up a satellite office here. And I just said it, hoping that nobody, not hoping that nobody will, but not believing that anybody will. And by the end of that week, we had 5 investors with $1,000 each in cash, giving it to a whitey that they don't know, who would leave with cash dollars back to South Africa. And what I've learned from that lesson is, once you reach that point of no return, it's all of a sudden the game changes, and you become so focused, and you start becoming so aware of where can I find help and resources. And in that same crowd that I met that week, we find the importer, we set up the company, we did everything in that week. But I didn't go there with all that information at hand. So I think for me, the key is, it's a process. You have to be trained for what's coming. And I think in all those examples, you have to either trust the equipment, like in Ian's case, you have to trust the equipment and the process, what he was trained on. Or in the case of Trevor, he had a friend who was with him, and he trusted his friend and the equipment. So so I think the risk is a great thing, because it pushes you out of your comfort zone. I just hate when other people take risk on my behalf, or push me into risk that I'm not prepared for. But if it's a risk that is almost of your own making, there's always a positive outcome.
Great, thanks, Jasper. And Herman has been asking if you can share something. I think, as Lee suggested, we'll take it over to tomorrow morning. So Herman, if you don't mind, I think we'll pick this up tomorrow. I think there's a lot more we can perhaps discussing the topic. So Lee, a quick wrap up from you, and then I think we'll call it a morning for now.
Yeah, just to say thank you to everyone for sharing your personal stories. It adds such a rich dimension to the conversation. So we're not just making points, but we're illustrating them with these really powerful stories. So if you have more stories about risks that you've taken, then please think about sharing them tomorrow. I think let's also think about, you know, we are in a very, very risky time. What risks, and I love Mpumelelo's point about how can we have the mindset that looks at the gain rather than the loss. So as we look into the future, as we look into the present, and what appetite do we need to have for risk to see what gain we can make in these current circumstances. And then we'll come to Herman and ask him to share something around his risk assessment tool. So let's carry on this conversation tomorrow. Thanks everyone, such a great morning.
Go well everyone, good day. Cheers now.